think we got it. Guys, thanks so much for participating in this webinar. Webinars have been an interesting thing. It's one of the things that I've learned the most through over this past year of trial and error of learning things has been jumping on webinars. So pretty cool for me to be a part of one, doing my first one. The only difference is I have nothing to sell you. I promise you there's nothing at the end, so you can leave if you feel like it sometime. There's no offer at the end, which is, I know, the typical webinar thing. I know the webinar gods out there are probably yelling at me, you have to sell something at the end. For me, it's about teaching you guys and helping everyone grow, because I think we really need more podcasts, and I want to talk through that. Shoot me a message if for some reason I'm going to turn my webcam off and go into the presentation, and we'll jump in and out of that quite a bit, because I'm going to walk you through how to use the software, how to actually record audio and put it out there. So give me one sec. Let me make sure that if there are any more questions. Looks like we're good. Okay. All right, guys, I'm going to get this rolling. Let's go to view. Let's go to full screen. Here we go. You know what? I forgot that I need to do this. I apologize. Here we go. I need to go into view present. There we go. All right, guys. So this is the webinar on how to start a podcast. I think I know every single one of you that's on the webinar right now. If you don't know who I am, my name is Will Boyd. I'm a physical therapist, and I host two podcasts. I host the Two Nobodies Talking podcast, and I host the Breaking Student Debt podcast. And truthfully, I knew absolutely nothing about podcasting a year ago, other than I listened to podcasts. I was obsessed with consuming the Smart Passive Income podcast with Pat Flynn, Tim Ferriss's podcast. There were so many. The Art of Charm is one of my favorites. It became a source of using time that would normally just zone out or listen to music, and I made it about consumption of knowledge. And I think you guys are all in the same place, and that's why you want to do a podcast, and so I want to dive into it. So why am I making a webinar about podcasting? I've found over the past year, after I started doing podcasting, that the biggest pain point seems to be that there's this huge barrier of entry to get into podcasting. So I hear a lot, I don't get technology, I'm not a techie, I'm not a technology person, I don't know how to do it. Kind of like we were talking right before the webinar, I had this misconception that it was going to cost a lot of money to start a podcast, and that's not true at all. I'm even going to show you how to do it for free during this. There's also so many podcasts out there. Why would anyone listen to yours? And we're going to break it down why you absolutely should start a podcast, and that there are so many ears ready to listen to what you have to say. So personal successes since I started, we'll dive into it here, but started the Nobodies podcast and the Breaking Student Debt podcast, and what has come from that in the past year has been incredible, and I could have never imagined the opportunities and the doors that would open from just hitting record on a microphone and talking to people. And lastly, I want to be a part of your story. I want your story to get out there to help other people, because I do feel like we're in an environment now where your story matters more than ever, and there is some niche audience out there waiting to connect with you. So for me, podcasting is all about that. 12 months ago, I knew nothing about podcasting. I actually was going to start a blog on how to help young men between the ages of like 18 and 30 find their passion and find their path. And I realized I didn't want to write all the time. I was kind of lazy, and I even though I liked writing, it was just taking so much time, and I thought there's got to be a different way. And so I asked a friend of mine who was going to help me with the blog. I said, why don't we just record ourselves? And that was the beginning of the Nobodies podcast. And at that time, all I knew is I needed to know how to record. And I figured I needed a $1,000 microphone. I figured I needed all this software and equipment, and I'd have to pay iTunes. So lots of trial and error. I figured out you don't need any of that. And if you're sitting here listening right now, you only need a few things, and that's going to be a microphone. That's going to be, I lied, you don't even need a microphone. You just need a computer, which if you're watching this, you're probably watching it through a phone or computer, so you're good. You only need your voice, and you only need the internet. Those are the three things. Right now, you can start a podcast. In fact, by the end of this today, what I want is for you to be able to actually just go and do it if you're inspired by this and you want to start episode number 1. So why am I doing this webinar for everybody? Well, it's been a blast. The opportunities have been endless. These are 3 podcasts that I've helped start up. There have been more, but I think you guys might resonate with these. The Duckleg podcasts are 2, 3 actually physical therapy students across the country who are doing some really cool work. They're just talking with people, trying to have fresh perspectives about physical therapy. The Healthcare Education Transformation podcast as well. They followed my ebook. All 3 of these helped, started their podcast based off of my ebook. So if you have the ebook, it's great. I just want this to be sort of a more visual, quick tutorial on how to get started. And then Amp Life, which is run by a prosthetics company in Pittsburgh that I actually helped them, and they're actually about to be picked up for a sponsor soon. So they're about to be monetizing their podcast, and hopefully here in the near future, which is just really, really cool. And we're going to dive into some of those things that might interest you, like monetizing your podcast. So since 12 months ago, between the 2 podcasts, I've had over 50,000 downloads between them. And really, I say that not to be a humble brag, but to tell you that a year ago, I didn't even know what I was going to talk about. And the next thing you know, there are 50,000 downloads of the audio content that we pumped out there. And I am nothing special, and I think a lot of you have interacted with me one-on-one. I just think a little bit differently, but there's nothing really special about me or talent. I have no tech talent. It's just been purely a lot of hard work. And then because of it, there have been some really cool financial opportunities. I've been able to do some consulting work as a podcast consultant. So started a very small business doing consulting for people. We've been able to get a sponsorship for the Nobody's podcast, on the verge of getting a sponsor for the Breaking Student Debt podcast. Nothing that's going to pay your entire bills, don't get me wrong, but at least a little bit of extra income. And then we're soon looking at affiliate marketing, which if you don't know affiliate, it just means you get a commission for selling someone else's product. We'll get to that down the road if you want to talk about it later. So yeah, and then through this process, I had to learn how to make a website for our podcast, how to do social media marketing, things that just naturally come with promoting the things that you're doing. And I've actually been able to build a small consulting business doing that as well. And that all came from just hitting the record button and figuring out, how do I get people to listen to this? And then lastly, everything has been about relationships, relationships, relationships. The people that we've got to meet has been incredible. In fact, a lot of you I know through a physical therapist program. His name's Greg Todd. It's called Smart Success Alumni. Shout out to all my Smart Success alumni friends in that. If it hadn't been for the podcast, I don't think I would have met Greg, and I don't know that I would have joined that group, and I don't know that I'd have the community that I have today, and that's just all through building these relationships. So that being said, you never know what can happen in 2 months, 6 months, a year's time when it comes to just putting effort into a project and having good intentions. So I just want to show you a little bit about what's possible, what happened for me in a year and what could be possible for you as well. So real quick, why podcasts? Remember the one question I posed earlier, why would anyone listen to my podcast? Well, guess what? Podcasting is not dead. Podcasting is actually on the rise, and it's been on the rise for the past 10 years. So over the past 10 years, podcast consumption has increased 10 to 20% year over year. Not just 10 to 20% over the past 10 years, but year over year. And for the first time in the past few years that they've been tracking this, this was from an article that I got from Convince and Convert. The company that did the research is escaping me right now. I can't remember what they're called. But they found out through their research, they figured out that the average listener now is between 25 and 50 years old. It's not just a young person's medium. We're having adults at work. The other day, just as an example, the other day I was frisbee golfing or disc golfing with friends, and one of them finally found my Facebook and said, "Hey, you do a podcast?" And I said, "Yeah, I host a couple podcasts." He's like, "Oh, that's so crazy. I listen to podcasts about motorbike races all day." Apparently there are like 4 huge motocross podcasts, and he listens to them while he's at work. He has a little cubicle and he sits and he just listens to those all day. And it makes sense, right? A lot of us are at desks. We have the ability to put on a radio or to listen to something, or headphones if we're just typing. So podcasting is getting up there, and you can passively consume it. And here are some crazy stats. This absolutely blew me away. 42 million Americans listen to podcasts on a weekly basis, which is 5 times more than the number of people that go to the movies each week. 42 million Americans per week. That's not 42 million ever have listened. 42 million Americans listen per week. So there's no excuse to say that there's not room for me, that someone's not going to listen to my podcast. Because the average person also subscribes to 6 shows. So most podcasts come out weekly or bi-weekly. To think that you could consume all of that is going to be tough. So there are, and I'll tell you what, podcasting can be time-consuming in the sense that, sometimes we're struggling to get something out once a week. So there are going to be so many time spots to fill with your podcast that other people, just can't fill. And so there's always going to be room for you and the niche that you want to attract. So I want to talk about podcasting. There's 3 things that we can do with podcasting. So it's not just, one thing I hear is, what do I have to say? I don't think I have anything to give to anyone. Well, there's room for you no matter what you want to do. And I've really thought about podcasting in 3 different ways. You can either podcast to teach or educate, as I would say. Maybe you're an expert on a subject. I know we have some fitness people listening, I saw, that are on here. Dale, I saw you. You're a fitness expert, someone that you can use your podcast to input your expertise and share that with the world. And that can be just you. Maybe you're just the teacher and someone's listening. Dave Ramsey, for example, is a great example. He does a business and finance podcast and does all that, and he just teaches. You can also document. So if you've heard my podcast, Breaking Student Debt Podcast, I do interview a lot of people, but it's also a way to document my struggles, what I'm going through, this whole process. It's essentially just writing about it, but through audio form. And then lastly, facilitate, which I think is one of the most powerful ways of podcasting and one of the most powerful ways to accelerate your career and accelerate your network. Because facilitating through podcasting is all about sharing. People want to get their message out. If you think about social media, the entire purpose is to get your message out to someone else. Through a podcast, you get to connect with someone. So let's say, for example, the Nobodies. We wanted it to be about health and wellness topics at a general public level in terms of language that anyone could understand. Well, we didn't feel like we were experts because we were still students. So we decided, what if we just interview experts and they share their knowledge and they share their mission? And so far, it's been great. We've been able to get people I would have never imagined, National Geographic cover authors, some of the leading people in the strength and fitness community, like Andy Galpin of Barbell Shrugged. Just you name it, people we can do, we never thought we would get. We've been able to get on our podcast, and it just continues to grow. We've had the sleep doctor on who wants to come. He emailed us to come back on, which is just goes to show you that if you have a platform to share someone else's message, you will be in demand. So those are my 3 things: teach, document, or facilitate. You have a place that you can fall in on one of those 3, and podcasting will make sense for you. All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. I know this is why you guys came. I didn't mean to take so long of getting into the background. But like I mentioned in the beginning, what do you need to get started to host a podcast? And by default, you listening to this webinar, you are already able to record an episode and launch a podcast. If you're watching this, that means you have access to the internet. If you're watching this, this means you probably have a computer or just your phone, which I think you could do through just your phone. That's something I haven't tried yet, but I think you could run a podcast just from your phone. And lastly, your voice. So I can't hear you right now, but my guess is that you have a voice, and those are the only 3 things stopping you from starting your podcast. So I want to dive into software. And we're going to jump into a little bit of quick tutorials. So there are 2 main platforms. There are many others, but I would say in terms of use of ease, these by far are the places to start. So for Mac users, we have GarageBand, which is built into your Mac, so you don't have to download anything. Unfortunately for PC users, there is no equivalent of GarageBand. I know there's a knockoff that you can try to find, but I would highly recommend just going with Audacity, which is the other platform that can be used for Mac or PCs, and I highly recommend for PCs. It's free to download. It's also just allows for easy editing with a few short lessons. All right, so I'm going to jump out of my screen here. We're going to do a quick lesson on GarageBand and Audacity, and I want to show you just how easy it is to record a podcast. I'm going to jump in here real quick. Let me see I'm going to check the questions here and see if anybody's got anything posted. Just want to make sure Looks like we're good. How do I see the PowerPoint? Oh no, has anyone... Will you guys send me a message if you can see the PowerPoint? I hope I didn't just ramble and no one could see the PowerPoint. Oh no! Oh no! Man. Oh shoot. Guys, can you see this? I messed up big time. I didn't even share my screen. Talk about a newbie with webinars. Can you see this now? Thanks, Felicia. Oh my gosh, guys. Oh, this is going to go down in history if I ever get interviewed for something that, what a blunder. I didn't even hit. Oh man, guys, thanks for sticking around. Oh man, I'll flash through. I will flash through the slides for you guys real quick, but oh man, what a blunder. All right, so here's all the slides, the beautiful slides. I promise they weren't as exciting as as they as I hopefully made them sound. But anyways, here's pictures of my podcasts, and then here's pictures of the ones that I've helped start, and they're doing really, really well. I'm really proud of those guys. Matt Villegas, who's on here, is going to be starting one soon too. And thanks, Aaron. I'm glad you guys could see it. I probably should have checked on that right away. Oh man, so these guys are doing great. And then we just talked about some of the things that, you know, how this has helped me. Here's the pictures I had for why podcasting still matters. Dave Kittle's on here. He hosts the PT Tech Talk podcast. Incredible show. If you're out there and curious about technology in the healthcare world, definitely give his podcast a listen to. Here's where I was at with Teach, Document, Facilitate. There is a spot for you in podcasting. One of these will fit what you need. To see the chat, Danelle, I'm not sure. I think I think there will be a way. You know what? I will see if I can figure that out as we go. Here we go. Let's go. I couldn't even see myself when I was talking, so I was probably looking like a crazy man just getting into it. But here we go. We're getting started. You guys can see. That's good. I'm glad we got into this now, because now you can see what really is going to happen. So we're going to dive into GarageBand. So this is GarageBand's for Mac users. So if you're a PC user and you don't have a Mac, just bear with us for a couple minutes, and I'm just going to show you. So if you have a Mac, you can open up GarageBand now if you want, or you can wait. I'm going to turn off my webcam just so we don't lose, so we can spare some bandwidth. All right. So I'm going to exit out of this. Get out of this. So when you go into GarageBand, you're going to get a new project will show up. And all we're going to do is, I always choose voice. You can choose an empty project. You can play around with these other things, but to get you started today, you can just double click on voice, and it brings up this new screen. Right here is where the magic happens in recording. So you don't even need a microphone. You can just start recording with this. If you click this little info button down here, your input is going to tell you what your microphone is. And if you don't have a microphone, it's going to automatically set to default, which is your built-in microphone. Now I have YouTube videos built just to help you with this aspect of the editing process and the how to get all of this arranged, so I won't dive into too much details. My entire goal is to show you that you can get started today if you wanted to. So one thing I noticed with GarageBand that always was tricky for me is you get all these different narration vocal, bright vocal, classic vocal, fuzz vocal. So they all change your sound. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stick with narration vocal, and you can come down and change to narration, change to narration. I do that. If you don't, for example, if I stay on, we'll get into it. So narration vocal, I'm going to start recording. So I'm recording right now. GarageBand is picking up my sound, and you can see the little sound waves going on. It's picking up what I'm saying. So right now, I am recording what potentially could be a podcast episode, which is pretty sweet. And then if I go back and I start, if I start at the beginning and I hit play, recording. So I'm recording right now. GarageBand is picking up my sound, and you can see the little sound waves going on. It's picking up what I'm saying. So that's it. You can actually start recording right now if you have GarageBand, and I'll show you in a minute exactly how you can do that with Audacity. Now, one thing that I quickly realized is that if you click record and you're on one of these other ones that doesn't say narration, I'll try to record now, and you'll be able to hear the difference. It's going to put this weird dance synth background on it that we don't want. So then I go to play it, and it turns out to be this I'll try to record now, and you'll be able to hear the difference. It's going to put this weird dance synth. Yeah, so if you end up recording and you get a weird sound in GarageBand, definitely check these. That gave us a lot of trouble in the beginning. But essentially, we're going to keep this up and we'll come back and show you how. We're going to let's walk through this now through GarageBand. So let's say I had recorded everything that I wanted to record. And we can go through in GarageBand. I can come down here at the bottom. And let's say that there's a part that I really don't like. See the little sound waves going on. It's picking up what I'm saying. Okay, so let's say I didn't like that last couple of seconds. So if I double click on this bar up here, it will pull it up down here. And you have to get to where you get this little cross action going on, this little up and down thing on your icon. And then I can just drag and I can cover as much of the track as I want, and I can just click delete and it's gone. And then what I do is I can just drag this other part over, and now it's matched up, and now that segment is just gone. And we can play it as if it were mixed together. I'm recording right now. GarageBand is picking up my sound, and you can see, so right now I am recording with potential, and it goes through. So that's one really cool thing that you can do. You can just delete things and then add it on. The other cool thing is with GarageBand in particular, you can just drag things over. So let's say one of these was an audio clip. So you wanted to do like an intro, and this could be your audio clip up here. And this would be you talking. So I'll show you. One will play over the other. So I'm recording here right in the middle. GarageBand is picking up my sound, and you can see. Cool. So what you can do in GarageBand is you have this little button up here, this Show Hide Automation. And I'm going to show you how we can reduce the sound on any of these. So let's say I want this to be quieter. I can just scroll down. And this to stay the same sound that it's normally at. So when I do this, starts out soft. So right now I am recording over. And so that's how you can mess around with overlaying things with loud sounds and quiet sounds. Then the other thing that you can do with this yellow bar is really cool, is that you can just click along it and it'll make a little ball or a little dot, and then you can make multiple dots wherever you want. And then this is the really cool thing about GarageBand that I love. You can just drop this down, and that means that the sound just fades out. So if I wanted this to fade out as I started talking, looks like I'll start talking here, and it'll start to fade out there, and you'll be able to see it just fades away. I'm recording right now. GarageBand is picking up. So right now I am recording with potential. And there you go. And that's where GarageBand is so easy to use and phenomenal, and how you can fade in and out sounds, you can overlay tracks. I have specific YouTube videos that go into more depth on how to kind of manipulate these things, but I want to show you that right now you have the tools. The 3-4 things that I just showed you, you can make a solid sounding podcast episode. Now, let me check real quick, guys. We are going to go into the how do you get this out of here? So how do we make this into a track that we can upload? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Share. I'm going to go to Export Song to Disk, and then we're going to title it, let's just say, Webinar Episode, into my desktop. And so that will have shared it. And let's just double check here. Don't mind my messy desktop, but Webinar Episode's an MP3 file. Recording. So I'm recording right now. And voila. GarageBand is picking up. So right now I am recording with potential. Cool. And so that's really as simple as it is when it comes to GarageBand to get you started. You can do that, and then we'll talk about how we actually upload that into a place where you can store it. Like I said, I have YouTube videos on all the details. I don't want to make it so complicated today. The other thing that I wanted to show you then is Audacity. And guys, feel free to put in questions if something comes up that you have a question about or don't feel confident on. And I left some time for Q&A at the end. Try to get this going quickly here. So we've got Audacity. Audacity is for PC users, and I want to show you just how easy it is to use as well. So in Audacity, you've got all this looking like, what is this weird screen? Really, all you want to worry about right now is this big red record button. So when I hit the big red record button, we are recording. And just like GarageBand, you can see the sound waves going. And so it's picking up my sound right now. I probably didn't set my microphone to or set my sound to the microphone, so it's not picking it up completely. But we'll hit stop. So obviously here I probably should have put my microphone, but it doesn't matter. We're going to go back to the beginning. We'll hit play. The big red record button, we are recording. And just like GarageBand, you can see the sound waves going. Perfect. So that's the same thing. Just like GarageBand, yeah, I definitely recommend GarageBand if you have a Mac, Brian. Yeah, GarageBand to me has been the easiest thing that I've ever used. So I highly recommend GarageBand to Mac users. So someone to hear what you've recorded, how do you access that, a file or an app? So we'll go through that. We'll go through that. I'll show you how to do that here in a minute and how we upload that and how we're going to make this actually onto iTunes and get you launched when you want to. So same thing here with Audacity. We can just select a segment by just highlighting, and then I can delete. So I didn't like that part. And the cool thing about Audacity that GarageBand doesn't do is it automatically slides it over to you and syncs it together, and you don't have to do that. So if you are GarageBand and Audacity files interchangeable? No, as far as I don't know, but I'm going to show you here in a minute, Danelle, how you can just take your MP3 file. You can take your GarageBand file, convert it to an MP3, and then put it into Audacity. Yeah, Dale, this is going to be recorded, so don't worry, it's being recorded right now. We'll make sure that this gets out to everyone. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end as well. So guys, you can delete just that easy. I can pick a segment. So let's say, you know, oops. The big red record button, we are recording. And just like GarageBand, you can have my sound right now. So you could tell it had already deleted that one section and skipped over. So the cool thing about Audacity too is that we can just add in another track. So if we go to tracks, add new, mono or stereo, I usually do a stereo track. And again, I have YouTube videos on how to do this. So just to save you, if you're interested in getting more into editing details, you can get into that. But here's the same thing. Now I could record over this. So recording part 2, recording part 2, recording part 2, recording part 2. And so we go back and cool, kind of crazy, kind of chaotic, but then you can also lower the sound on just one of them, which I will show you in my YouTube videos. I don't want to make it so complicated right now. But yeah, when you get that, then we do this. We do save this project. Yep, we want to save. I'm just going to save it as Audacity webinar episode. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to, let's see. Bear with me one sec. It's been a minute since I've done, here we go, export audio. And now we're going to make sure it's an MP3 file, and we're going to go to my desktop. And then I'm going to close out of Audacity. I'm going to close out of Audacity for a second. And here's what we'll do. So Audacity webinar, now you have this MP3 file. Obviously not the ideal sounding recording. That's just because I overlaid the two. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how you can do that. So with those basic skills, you actually can start a podcast today if you want to. Let's see, how do you convert audio from videos to audio on GarageBand? Pass FB Live videos to audio just so I can use. I'll get to it later, Felicia. And if you're the only one who's curious about it, I'll show you. It really isn't that crazy of a process, but we'll go through it, which is great. It doesn't take too much time. So I want to show you one other thing, both in GarageBand and Audacity. So let's say GarageBand, I start a new project. Let me know if this is going too fast or too slow. We'll get through it. Here's what we're going to do. We don't need to save that last one. I'm going to open a track. And what's cool with GarageBand and Audacity is you can take a file that you already have. So I can go over, if you don't want to look for it, you can just drag it in. So let's see, I've got an intro to a podcast that I did before. And I can literally just click out here, drag it, and I can just drop it into GarageBand. and now it will play. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the... And you can do that. And now I can double click, and it's just like we had done our own recording. We can edit things, we can change the sound, we can fade in, we can fade out. All of those details. And the exact same thing with Audacity. So I'm going to close out of GarageBand just because my computer tends to be running a little bit slow. We'll open up Audacity. And the exact same thing can be done with Audacity. So kind of like you were talking about, Danelle, how do I take a GarageBand file? What you want to do is export it as an MP3 file, and then to put it into Audacity, you just do the same thing. You drag and drop, and then it inserts all of the audio file. And now we can hit play. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of... And now we're in the same spot where I can just go, and let's say I didn't like this chunk of time, I can delete it if I want, I can compress the sound, and I have YouTube videos on those about the detail. Here's what we will do then. So I wanted to give you a brief, quick overview to show you that these are the basic tools to actually recording an episode. And I'll talk in a minute about how you do interviews. But essentially, once you get an MP3, you can just drop it in here, or if you want to record yourself, you just open up GarageBand or you open up Audacity. Both are free, and you just hit the record button. And the great thing is because you can delete, you don't have to hit record and then say you make a mistake, you don't have to hit delete and start over. You can just let the record button go and you just start again, and then you can go back and just highlight and say, there's all the mistakes I did, boom, they're gone. So I just want to show you how easy it can be. It doesn't have to be a crazy time-consuming process. You know, literally we've gotten it down to a point now where it takes us maybe a half an hour at most to do a podcast, unless there's a lot of weird audio sounds. And that's usually more based on the internet than it is on our actual recording. So I want to take you guys back. Let's talk about how once you get these files, what do we do with them? How are we going to end up getting this on iTunes? Because that's really everyone's ultimate goal, is to get on iTunes, and either that or on Stitcher or on Google Play, and it all goes really through the same process. So I want to show you how we do that by coming over here to this and show you what we use. So if you are a podcaster, the majority of podcasters are using something called Libsyn, or they're using SoundCloud. Now there are other options, I just want to show you two, and I want to tell you the difference. So if I can scroll down here, here's how this works. If you think about your audio file that you have created now is a giant chunk of data, and what iTunes does not want to do is have to store your giant chunk of data. So other services have been developed to essentially become digital lockers where you can store your audio files. So that way iTunes doesn't have to actually store the data. They can just stream it and not actually have to host it. So imagine having access to it but never actually having to host it. Kind of like grandkids, you know? Like your grandkids can just be way out there, you can go see them whenever you want, but they don't have to come home with you. That's kind of like what Libsyn and SoundCloud are. They're your grandkids. You can kind of let them go when you want to, they're your kids. They're the parents, actually. They have to host the actual data. So Libsyn is Libsyn is not free. It comes as little as $5 a month last time I checked, and SoundCloud can be absolutely free. But SoundCloud is free up to a limit, as in the amount of data you store. So I think ideally you can probably get away with one half-an-hour episode a week and be okay being on the SoundCloud free version. And then it goes up to, I think, $9.99 a month. They're really, really cheap deals. And I just want to show you how this works. So if I go to Libsyn, this is what Libsyn looks like. And I highly recommend Libsyn. If you're going to pay any money, I recommend Libsyn. And we can look at the plans real quick. So plans begin at $5 per month. And you get, I think we're on, for example, the Nobodies. We do at least 4 close to 1 hour episodes a month, and we are on this $20 a month plan, and we're usually covered easily. So if you don't want to make that investment and you don't think you're going to have an episode every week, maybe once every 2 weeks, I highly recommend starting with the $5 plan, and Libsyn will tell you if you've gone over your data, and you can just bump it up if you want to. You can bump up to the $15 plan. and it automatically lets you do that. And I just want to show you the cool thing about Libsyn. And this is where if one day you hope to monetize your podcast or you want to take it to the next level of being able to understand your audience, here's Libsyn. So here's sort of our details of a little snapshot of the dashboard. You can track kind of some basic numbers of our podcast. And then here's what's really cool is it tracks stats. And so you can come in, you can see per episode how many people have been listening to your episodes. What's really cool too is you can look at, so the show in general, where are people listening from? So we've had people listen from the majority of the US, Australia, Canada, kind of different places throughout the world. You can look at the technology, how are they listening? So, you know, add in 5.12 to this, and that's pretty much all iTunes related, so the vast majority is through iTunes. And then we have our different traffic sources, so how are people finding out about the podcast? It just looks like it's delaying a second. Oh, here we go. You can look at kind of how people are finding it, which I think is really cool. So here's how this all works. When you sign up for Libsyn, you end up doing, you're going to add a file for download only. And this I walk you through in the ebook, which I have a handout here, and I'll put the link in. If you don't have the ebook yet, you can look into it. Let's see, Dale. Yeah, I think the stats are available. So I think the stats are available with any. It just depends on, because their plan isn't based on giving you stats. It's about how much, their bigger role is about how much storage space that you need for your data. As far as I know, the $5 one, you still get to track your stats. For example, we've bumped up from the $5 now to the $20, and I think between the two, I might be on the $40, and there's no difference in terms of stats that you can get. So they don't really market off of stats, just storage space. Good question, though. And here's the cool thing. So I have this thing called monetizing tab. That's actually not what we're going to talk about in terms of monetizing. That's for more like when you have hundreds of thousands of downloads. So if you get to that point, please remember me and let me be a part of your podcast. But what we'll do is you're just going to add file for download. And so that MP3 file that you have, we can go in here and we can just upload. And I won't walk you through all the steps, but we'll just say, here's that intro that I had. We will upload it. And we'll wait just 1 second. And it will upload. And then what we'll do is we'll save as draft. And we can come back to it. So this won't be the most important part, but we can come to drafts. And I just want to show you what you can do. So I go to my draft, so it hasn't been published yet, which means it hasn't been released out publicly, and I can edit things. So we can go through, I can edit the intro, you know, webinar episode 1, and then I can put in my description, your show notes, and these are all the things that are eventually going to show up on iTunes. And I walk you through a little bit more in some of the YouTube videos I have, and if I don't have this one, I will make one soon about how to use Libsyn. But the really cool thing about Libsyn is that when you're ready, so what Libsyn and SoundCloud do is they give you what's called an RSS feed. And that's this thing. If you go to destinations and go editor view existing, you get an RSS feed. Now, this might sound like a lot of technical stuff, but really all we end up needing to have is this RSS feed. And imagine something that is constantly sending data to iTunes. So anything you do in Libsyn, it goes through this link and sends it to iTunes, which I will show you here in a second. I want to show you SoundCloud real quick and just show you that it's just as easy to do through SoundCloud. So I'm logged in. You can sign up for SoundCloud for free, and you just get in, and it looks like this, and these are just episodes that we've opened. But essentially, you would come here, imagine the screen is blank, and you would have upload. And all you're going to do is the exact same thing. Choose a file to upload. We'll do the episode. And again, the same things pop up. They've done a really good job of making this pretty streamlined that you can just change the episode title. You can add in tags or track if you want. You know, put in descriptions, which I highly recommend. Genre, totally up to you. It will matter if you're trying to get ranked on Google or on iTunes that you do pick a genre. So definitely do that, and we can. Those are kind of more later on. My goal is just to be able to get you up and running for now. So essentially that's it, and then we can just save. You can add an image if you want. And then if we go to our settings, we can go to, I believe it's settings, and we'll go to, here's our RSS feed again. So content and then settings. And these RSS feed is going to be important because our next step here in a second, I want to make sure, is that we go to iTunes, which is everyone's goal. So you're on SoundCloud. I just hope it makes sense to you guys how easy it is to get onto Libsyn. Really, all you have to do is sign up, and then you're in, and it looks just like this. You just don't have as much content yet. It looks just like this. What I just walked you through is exactly how you post an episode onto Libsyn, and that's going to register through your RSS feed. And the exact same thing with SoundCloud. If you just sign up and you upload a file, this is how we started. We started out with SoundCloud, and eventually SoundCloud just didn't track data as well as we wanted to, and we also found that it was more expensive per data storage. And so we switched over to Libsyn. Things were just simpler, but SoundCloud is just as good, just personally we chose a different route. And so now what we're going to do is, if you have an iTunes, I'm just going to assume that you have an iTunes. If you don't, you can download iTunes. And if you have a podcast, if you start your podcast and I don't give you a review yet, it's because I cannot remember for the life of me my iTunes password to log into this. So shame on me for that. I should have that. But I just want to show you. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to go to, when you open up iTunes, you're going to go to your iTunes store. You're going to go, and if it's not set on podcasts, most people when you open up your iTunes, it's set on music. You are going to go to podcasts, and we're going to go down, and you're going to do submit a podcast. And I want to show you just how easy this process is. And this is all laid out in the ebook. I just want to give you the visual version of how this works. So luckily, I think I remember my iTunes password. Whew, nice. All right, update password. Cool. So you're in here, and this is what will show up. You won't have the two podcasts here, obviously, but you'll have this blank space and a big plus arrow over here. And this is what we want to do. We just want to hit that plus arrow, and all you do is you put in your RSS feed. Now, it won't let me do mine because I already have an existing RSS feed, but all you have to do is copy this, whatever your Libsyn one is, or your SoundCloud RSS feed, and you just put it here, and we go to validate, and it'll validate that it's a real RSS feed. And so it says it can't submit because I already exist. But what it does is it sends you to a page just like this where you put in a picture that you want to use as well as your description. And then when you go to the bottom, it will have a submit, or sorry, when you get through there, it'll just have this come blue and say submit podcast. And guys, you literally can be on iTunes. It goes through a submission process that can take anywhere from, I've heard as quick as 2 days to like 2 weeks. Usually I'd say anywhere from 3 to 4 days you find out that you're on iTunes. So that's it. I know that was a lot of information. Guys, type in the chat if that was too much, or if you feel like that's something that a simple plan that you could follow if you used either Audacity or GarageBand, and then you signed up for Libsyn or SoundCloud. Let me know in the chat if you feel like that was relatively simple to follow. That's my entire goal of the webinar. So if it's not, I'm definitely going to have to figure out a better way to make it clear and concise, because, guys, I just want you to know that it only takes about those like 6-7 steps, and you can be on iTunes with your own podcast, which I just think is so cool. You have access to the entire world. If we think about, you know, the biggest search engines in the world, Google obviously is #1. YouTube is #2. But one of the most underrated search engines out there is iTunes, because so many people are hooked up on iTunes. So many people are hooked up through so many other things. So I'm just looking through some of these questions real quick. Brian says it's a good step-by-step. Thanks, Brian. Cindy says easy to follow. Awesome. Dale says pretty straightforward. Seeing the visual steps help, great. And with this being recorded, I can just send it to you, and you can look at it again. Felicia says, do you have a separate iTunes account for the 2 separate podcasts you have? Nope, I just do it all through my one iTunes account. So now I don't think there's a limit. You could probably have 35 podcasts on your own if you wanted to under iTunes. I've never had anyone try that, but I bet it could. I bet it could work. Let's see. Felicia asked, do you suggest making a separate iTunes account solely for podcasts? You can. Honestly, I don't know that it needs too much, but I would say you can do that. Let's see. I listened to the podcast you posted in the group the other day on 7 Reasons to Start a Podcast. Great stuff. Pat Flynn is amazing. Definitely check out that episode about how starting a podcast changed his life, and he's literally a multimillionaire today because he started a podcast. That gets me pumped. I don't know that I'll ever be there, but it just gets me excited to think that you might be one of the people who has a voice and a message that connects with a ton of people. So one of the last things that I get a lot of questions about is, okay, great, what if I want to record with other people? And I want to show you some of the options that you have, and I'm going to show you one that we use. So how do I record guests over the internet? So let's say you want to interview, we'll just say, we will say Bill Nye the Science Guy, who I'm desperately trying to get. Bill Nye the Science Guy, and he's in, let's say he's in Berlin for the week, and you can't get to him. So how are you gonna interview him? A lot of people use Skype, and Skype is great. We went away from Skype just for a few reasons, but Skype is great. There are plenty of YouTube videos on how to use Skype to record interviews with guests. Zencastr is a much more sophisticated version of kind of Skype and how it works. But what we use is called Zoom. And if you haven't used Zoom, I don't know how on earth Zoom is not the most used service for podcasting. It has been genuinely a lifesaver for us for our podcasting. I even got on the phone with Zoom representatives. I was able to talk to like the associate director of marketing and sales. And I was like, guys, you have to pump this out as a podcasting tool. Luckily, they already make so much money from doing, online conference meetings that they don't need to market that. But it's an incredible tool, and I just want to show you how you can use it and how we use it. So a little bit of facts here about Zoom that I think are really interesting and will help you. The best part about Zoom, kind of like Skype, is that you get unlimited free audio and video conferencing between 2 computers. So if it's just you and one other person, or just you and however many people on one computer and someone else and however many other people on one computer, you can literally record audio and video for as long as you want for free. Now if you have 3 or more computers, you get 40 minutes for free, both video and audio. And the best part is if that's up, you just you tell your guests that it's going to be over, and I'm just going to send you another invite. If Dave is still on here, Dave Kittle, we did this with Dave when he was a guest on our podcast. You know, we ran out of 40 minutes. Hey, can we send you another invite? Another free 40 minutes. And most people understand that. If there's a way that you can do it for free, they won't be upset. Now, if we had President Barack Obama on, I'd probably try to do it so I didn't have to email him twice. But otherwise, go free if you can. Why not? I keep hitting the down button. All right, the best part about Zoom too is it sends you automatic audio downloads and automatic video downloads. And I'll show you here in a second why it's so cool. It has very good audio quality. So I'm going to show you, you just type in zoom.us, so zoom.us, and you don't put in any money, you just sign up. Sign up, it's free. And you literally just put in your email, and what it will do is allow you to download Zoom. And I'll just show you, essentially, imagine I put in my email and it gives you the Zoom player down here. And I want to show you Zoom because Zoom is pretty cool. So Zoom is on here, and the best part is if you want to make this really simple, you can even use Zoom to just record yourself for podcasting. And if you want to record yourself doing video, it does both. So I'm just going to show you. Start with video. I'm going to do a sample podcast here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to hit record. So if you want, you just hit the invite button. It will link to the email address that you put in to log in with Zoom, and you can use that to send to other guests. Real quick, Felicia says, so when you use Zoom, are you automatically recording while you are on Zoom, or do you have to record with Zoom, do the interview, and then upload, transcribe? Good question. So I'll show you, Felicia. walk you through here real quick exactly what to do. So what we're going to do is you're just going to hit, so let's say you wanted to invite a guest, for example. Felicia, let's say I wanted to invite you. I'd hit invite. What it's going to do is link to my Gmail because that's what I put in here. And what I would do is I'll just send a, I'd send an email to Felicia at, feliciaisabadass.com. And then it would send to Felicia whatever her email address is, and then I would wait for her, and she just pops up on my Zoom. And she'd pop up here, and you'd be able to see a split screen, and then you just hit record. And so it's not recording all the time, Felicia. It only starts recording when you hit record. So now I'm recording. So literally this is me. So if you've seen my YouTube videos, I actually use Zoom. This is what I do. I just do this, and you can share your screen. So I could share screen, my desktop. Now I'm doing like 9 different share screens between the webinar and other things. But this is Zoom. So this is how I do video tutorials. So if you want to do video tutorials for your audience, if you want to do video tutorials for someone else, Zoom is such an incredible, incredible, powerful tool. I'll stop sharing the screen. Now you get it back to me. I want to show you the absolute coolest part about Zoom. I hit stop, and when you hit in meeting, it automatically starts downloading both the audio and video file for this, which I think is pretty awesome. So it just starts downloading. And honestly, for being free, I just can't recommend Zoom enough. I tried to get an affiliate deal with them, and they said they didn't need it because they have way too much business already, which is cool. I love them. I would love to support them. I always love to promote Zoom. I think it's been such a lifesaver for us. Now the cool thing is, now you have an audio track, and so it's not recording all the time, Felicia. It only starts recording when you hit record. So now I'm recording. Just go through. You share screens with tutorials for your audience. And I think so obviously there's a little bit of computer sounding echo to it because it is through the internet. You're using a service. But I think even given that, the sound quality is pretty good. Now lately on the Nobodies, we've been having some issues because we've been having about 3 to 5 people on the line at once, and it's just been a lot of bandwidth to use. But if you listen to a lot of our episodes, we use Zoom, and I would say the sound quality is pretty good for recording over the internet. And then what I wanted to show you too is that, where did that thing go? So many files. Here you go. It also downloads the video file. So let's say it's not recording all the time, Felicia. It only starts recording when you hit record. So now I'm recording. So literally this is me. So if you've seen my YouTube video. Okay, you get the point. So I think Zoom is amazing. I always recommend it. This goes into a little Zoom file, so I always copy these. I always just copy and then I paste them in my desktop so I don't forget about them before they fall into this deep world of Zoom folders. But guys, Zoom is incredible. So now, not only do you have an audio file that you can use to put into your GarageBand or your Audacity. So Felicia, as you were asking, how do we go then from downloading that? So if I take my Zoom file, what's really cool about Zoom too, Felicia, is you can just, I'm pretty sure you can save just the audio if we, all right, maybe not. There is a way. I'll have to remember how to do that. But anyways, getting back to it, you now have the ability to take that video, you can post it on YouTube. So not only are you making a podcast, but you're making a video log through YouTube with your episodes. We got away from it just because we had some guests who didn't want to be featured on video. And honestly, it was more work to post it up there too, so we just got away from it, but it's great. If you want to use video content, it's great. And so Felicia, you can then take that, let's see, that Zoom recording, let's just say that was a Zoom recording. We'll just say this Audacity webinar file again was a Zoom recording that came out as an MP3. And the exact same process can go how we were before. So we'll get out of this and open up a new file. And then we can just drag in, let's say this was the Zoom MP3 that we downloaded, and just stick it in. And then we can add our intro, we can add our outro if you want. So I hope it's becoming kind of clear, like, is it simple? No, there's definitely steps, but is it pretty easy compared to maybe what you might have thought? I hope so. I hope that it seems a little bit easier than maybe before you hopped on how easy it can be to do a podcast. So guys, I just want to talk to you here about, now you can go back to the basics. Essentially, you get your MP3 file from Zoom and you just put it into Audacity and you put it into GarageBand. And then if you want to make edits, you can. Otherwise, you can just upload it directly to your Libsyn or SoundCloud and then take it onto iTunes. So I wanted to spend just a couple minutes talking about marketing and attracting guests because podcasting is incredible. So obviously the world of social media matters. Let's see, I think I need to close some stuff down just to make things better, sound go smoother. Let's see, so social media definitely is the best way that we've been able to attract guests and market. So I want to introduce you to a tool. I think a lot of you already know about it, but it's called Canva. And Canva is where we make a lot of our graphics. So I had Cindy reach out to me before our podcast, before the webinar, about how do I make an ebook. And one thing that's really cool about Canva is that we can go to here, and Canva lets you do graphics. So I think most of you know about it, but I just want to show you just in case. So we do, so on the left, you get all these pre-templated graphics, and you can use the ones that are for free. So let's say here, let's say I didn't like this picture. Instead, I wanted to put a picture of my podcast on there. So I can go to somewhere down here. I probably have my podcast picture, and it'll just zoom in there. And I can change the wording really quick. So, breaking student debt. And Canva's awesome. You can just, it's so intuitive. You can change things however you want. So let's go green for money. Now you have a graphic that if you really wanted to. Obviously, I'm not the best graphic maker, so you can play around. The great thing, it saves it. So if you just go back to your your home page, it has all my previous graphics from here, and you can just keep going through that. I think, are most people familiar with Canva? Send in the chat if you're familiar with Canva. I think most people are probably pretty familiar with Canva. But yes, so then Cindy, what I wanted to show you is to make a cover. They actually have a really simple ebook cover down here that you can come here, popular design types ebook, and they have samples of an ebook cover. So some of these are cool, some of these are free, and it's the exact same principle. So here you go, you can get an entire layout, right? And you can make your table of contents page in Canva. You can even do the entire Word like you can document your entire Canva piece here if you wanted to by just copy and pasting from a Word document into this to make this really cool, beautiful looking ebook. And I think a lot of these have different settings that you can use, and you can just plug in a lot of these. So they have like a, you can just use these templates and go from there, and then you just copy the same page, and then you add more text in. So cool. Danelle knows Canva. Hey, Brian, breaking news. That's awesome. Dale, awesome. So this is where we make all of our graphics. So if you see anything for the Nobodies or Breaking Student Debt, we use Canva to make all of our graphics. And I use it honestly, like, so now I do private consulting for a few companies doing Facebook ads, doing social media marketing stuff, and I use Canva as what I go to. For a free service, it is incredible. Between Zoom and Canva, honestly, guys, you could conquer half of the world with Zoom and Canva in the social media game. Yeah, and so Cindy, that's how we make an ebook. We either do it that way, or we just take a Word document and then we save it as a PDF. And so you can add in graphics and then save it as a PDF. And I'll make a video for you later on that you can watch just exactly how to make the ebook. But it's been an hour, guys, and I feel bad. I didn't want it to take this long, but what I wanted to tell you more than anything is that as much as Nike probably has some ethical issues, they nailed it on the head when they said just do it. Literally, the best thing that you can do is just take action. I'm a huge believer in that imperfect action beats perfect inaction. So When I say that, I mean that you never know what things are going to lead to. Good to see you guys again. You never know what things are going to lead to by just starting. So we didn't even know when we started a podcast that we would have anyone listen. I honestly thought that my mom would be the only one listening, and I always joke about that, but I'm dead serious. I really thought my mom would be the only one listening, and she'd text me and be like, "Oh my gosh, it's so great what you're doing," and she'd stop listening after 2 episodes. But, I feel like we had a genuine need. We started our podcast because we were frustrated at school. We felt like we weren't getting the education that we needed, and we wanted to just do something more. And I think the podcast can do that for anyone, whatever it is that you want to do. I honestly think if there's an aspect of an industry that you want to get into, you start a podcast and you start messaging people through Twitter, through Facebook, through Instagram. Hey, would you want to be on my podcast? Here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. Would you have any interest in being on my podcast? Because a podcast is so great. You're sharing someone else's message and mission, especially if you find people who have new products that they want to promote. It's a gold mine. Hey, I have this podcast. Most people don't ask you, hey, what's your audience? I've had one person out of the last, I don't even know, 60, 70 guests that I've had has ever asked for stats from our podcast. So the biggest names that we've ever gotten have never asked, hey, is it worthwhile to go on there? How many statistics, send me statistics. How many people do you have, checking it out? So guys, just go after it, get started. I really, really, really believe that every single one of us has a voice, and that voice is worth sharing. And just the worst thing that you can do is just say, I'm not good enough, or no one's going to listen, because you don't know. And guess what? If that does happen, hey, we're right back to where we started, and we try again. So I really hope this gets you started and sets you on a path where you can start your own podcast. And I have no intention to want to sell you something. I would just say that if you feel like you got any value from this, I would love if you could leave a rating on iTunes for one of my podcasts, either Breaking Student Debt or Two Nobodies Talking, which is now the Nobodies podcast. For me, it's just about giving, and I really, maybe one day I'll have things to sell, but for now it's just about helping other people grow, because I think we need more like-minded people doing great things. So guys, please get out there and let me know if and when you start your podcast. Let me know so I can promote it on our channels. We've got a decent reach. So, hey, Dale, you can find the Breaking Student Debt podcast on iTunes, or Google Breaking Student Debt podcast, and it'll come up. Let's see, Danelle. So I was going to jump into Q&A, so this is perfect. Danelle asks, how do you monetize this? How do you monetize a podcast, or is this best for promotion of ideas? So what I always recommend when it comes to monetization is there's the old school, the new school, and however you want it to be. So old school is you would get paid cost per million, CPM model, which means that you would get paid X amount of dollars for every 1,000 listeners, every 1,000 downloads of an episode. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense for most people, because a lot of people who do podcasts don't have thousands of people downloading their episode or every episode. So that model is kind of more for the, Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, guys who are getting hundreds of thousands of downloads per episode. So what I recommend is nowadays you can kind of do whatever you want. And I highly recommend building relationships with businesses first that you really want to align with, who you think would value for marketing with you. So, for example, we sought out a lot of physical therapists who ran companies or businesses, and we asked them to be on our podcast as guests. And that was really our true intention in the beginning. And then we built relationships with them. We were able to show them value that, hey, we just allowed for X amount of exposure for you guys. I don't know, let's say 600 people just signed up for your newsletter because they heard about you through our podcast. When you can start to demonstrate value, that's when you're in a position to monetize for a sponsorship. Now, what I would tell you is the probably best way to go, and what we're looking into, is affiliate marketing. It's essentially a commission through a link. So let's say that you wanted to start a podcast on, let's just say Dave, if Dave's still on here, Dave Kittle, he hosts a podcast called PT Tech Talk. Well, let's say that there was an app company that really wanted to get the word out about its product, and Dave really loved that product. He could say, hey, if you allow us to sell your app for a 5% discount, how about we get 10% of that sale? And so that's how you start going through affiliate marketing, and you start building commissions. Eventually, once you start showing worth, they'll actually probably want to do a sponsorship deal over an affiliate because you might be making so much money through that. Now, easier said than done. I highly recommend checking out the Smart Passive Income podcast by Pat Flynn, where he talks a lot about how you can monetize your podcast. Also, there's a great guy out there named Jan Ilunga, I-L-U-N-G-A, who hosts, he's sort of the founder of quite a few different Facebook groups for podcasts. I think it's Podcast Mastermind, Podcast Growth Community. Get in on those. There's tons of great information. And yeah, monetizing, I always tell people that shouldn't be your goal in the beginning. It should just be about building relationships, because ultimately monetizing comes from relationships, not from asking for money. One day you'll have to ask for money, but the odds of you getting some type of agreement comes from that relationship. So always start there. Provide value first for whoever it is that you want to seek out. And we can dive in more to that. I have a strategies guide that I'm able to put out as an ebook, and I'll do that probably in the next few weeks. Guys, I apologize that this took so long. Any questions for me? I hope I didn't bore you to death. I just really am passionate about getting people excited about putting out podcasts, because we need your voice. And let's see. Can you talk a little about the best format for a podcast in terms of length, structure, etc.? You know, I think it totally depends, Danelle. It depends on what you think your audience is into. You know, if you, for example, if you're talking about, I don't know, skateboarding, and people skateboard for 10 minutes at a time, I wouldn't say make your episodes longer than 10 minutes. For us, you know, we think a lot about, a lot of people who listen to our podcast, we assume are in their car or at work, and so they have time to listen to a half an hour, an hour. So if your audience is in that kind of middle, you know, mid-adult age, then, you know, maybe a half an hour to an hour is best. And ask for feedback. The best thing you can do is just start doing whatever you think you feel is best, and then ask for feedback. The number one thing that I can always give advice about is whatever you think the problem is now probably is not the problem at all, and you won't even know what the problems are or the things that you should fix until you've actually started. So I always recommend starting first. Trust your gut, whatever you think, and then you'll learn along the way about what your audience tells you or what other people are helping you or feeling about your podcast, whether it's too long, too short. At the beginning, people told us our podcasts were too long, and we just enjoyed talking to our guests for that long that we just couldn't make it shorter. And then I think people just kind of were like, all right, it's going to be a long podcast. So I think it's totally up to you. You know, I don't know that there's a science to it. I think really think about your audience. Who is your audience that you want to reach? You know, what would their attention span be? Do they have time to listen for an hour? Do they only have time to listen for 10 minutes? So, you know, that's what I would say. If there are no other questions, guys, I just really want to say how grateful I am and humbled that you stuck around for over an hour to listen to this. I mean, first webinar, I would have thought I maybe had 2 people to have you guys on here. It's been great. Guys, if you need if you want to catch the recording, I'm hopefully going to be able to figure that out through the webinar. Don't mind the first like 15 minutes where you just see my face and you don't see the PowerPoint slides. I'll see if I can figure that out. But guys, I'll wait one more minute. I just really hope that this brought some value. And if you start your podcast, I'm going to say when you start your podcast, shoot me a message, let me know, and I will promote it on all of our channels, because yeah, we're like-minded guys. Nick and I just started out as a project and ended up being something that has led to so many opportunities for us, and that's just all I hope it does for you guys. So looks like no other questions, guys. Have a great Thursday evening. If you're watching this on the recorded version, thanks so much for taking time to listen to this. It's been my pleasure. Guys, it's always an honor to have your ear. I take it very seriously, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Please leave a rating on iTunes for Two Nobody's Talking or Breaking Student Podcast, and I can't wait to hear from you guys. be ready for the next webinar at some point. Okay, guys, take care.